Welcome to the Self-Care 101 podcast with your host, straight-talking life coach, Puja McClymont. This show provides simple self-development, supporting you to embody your self-worth so that you can live the happier, more fulfilled life that you deserve without burning out. Thank you so much for listening today. Hello, it's season 2, episode 26. Today's show is a special treat. We're going to be learning about the importance of well-being in leadership with an incredible guest, Richard Twynam. Richard is a director-level leader. He encompasses all the aspects of great leadership effortlessly. And this is probably why I was drawn to him when we met in another podcast. I thrive being around great people who choose to do great things. Richard's been the director for Tui Travel, MD for Virgin, and MD for Royal Caribbean, to name just a few of the brilliant positions that he's held. Core to his great leadership style is the importance of well-being. In this show, he's going to share some of his non-negotiables when you're climbing the ladder of success, and also his 5 pillars of well-being that have been a game changer in both his personal life and the way he leads in his professional life. Richard's great, and I hope you'll find some fab insights and advice from an ambitious, successful, and very well-informed leader. If you love the Self-Care 101 podcast, please can you head over to Apple Podcasts, subscribe, and leave me a review. This really helps others find the show, and I'm eternally grateful for your support. Now on to the show. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Puja.
Thank you so much for being here today. I'm very excited about our show.
My pleasure.
I was thinking maybe you could start with, I've just realised, let me tell the listeners, I was about to say, might you start by introducing yourself?
Madam.
Yes, madam, because I've just been watching Downton Abbey. So let's start that again. Would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Puja. So I'm Richard Twynam, and I'm a travel guy. I've worked in travel my whole career, various roles, but for the last 13, 14 years, been a managing director. And for the last 18 months, I've been a freelancer. So it's great to, have this opportunity to chat with you and your amazing webcast listeners, viewers.
Thank you. So we're going to talk about something quite juicy, quite meaty, quite topical, which is well-being in the workplace, essentially, and more specifically in leadership, because there's a lot of focus on people being well in terms of their employees. There's lots of programs out there, but there's not a lot of talk about people in leadership roles needing to look after themselves. Now, I know when I was burning out, there wasn't a lot of information at all around. And it's not that long ago. We're talking about almost 10 years ago. There wasn't a lot of information. You had to work hard. If you wanted to get anywhere in your career, you had to work hard. There was no other choice. And you had to do whatever your employer expected of you, which I'm from travel and hospitality, and so you'll appreciate the demands on us. We worked very unsociable hours, and your time was never your own.
Yeah.
And essentially, you were just constantly on. And I know that is what contributed to my burnout, and that my plight now is to help others to prevent this. You can still achieve all the things you want to achieve. Just look after yourself in that journey. So I wanted to get into you telling me a little bit, or telling the listeners even, a little bit about your journey. So your career, what's it look like? Because I would imagine you have had to deal with a lot of stressful environments, running companies.
Yeah, yes. It's the short answer, but you don't want the short answer. So look, I've worked in travel for 25 years, and I think that anyone in any career that has aspirations to do a senior role tends to put everything into it, and that's great, and I think that's commendable. And you tend to be passionate about things you care about, and things that become almost a hobby for you, and that can be a danger as well. And that's where things perhaps can become out of balance. And I think one of the themes of everything I'll talk about today is that harmony is really hard to achieve. And so yes, I've been a managing director of some big brands. I've run brands for Virgin. I've run brands for Royal Caribbean, for TUI. And I remember when I first became a director, I was like, oh, I'm a director. Look, check my business card out. And it sounds quite senior, doesn't it? Director. And what you sign up to, I think, on reflection, having done it for a long time, is increased levels of responsibility, both commercially, but also to the people that you work with. And lots of people lose that focus and they lose that awareness that actually it's not about you. There's a lot of ego around board tables. There's a lot of ego in big business. And ultimately, a lot of business is quite soulless. It comes back to profits, share prices, money, and that's fine. And there's a place for that. And I'm not saying there isn't, but sometimes something gets lost along the way is wellness, is well-being, is people care. And I think one of the good things, if that is a statement to make post-pandemic, is that well-being and the awareness of it is now front and center of a lot of organizations, whereas perhaps it wasn't before. Something as simple as the earthquake that there has been in terms of allowing people to work from home so they can get balance, right? Is something that wasn't even considered pre-pandemic in so many businesses. So that's a long answer to a short question, but yes, it's stressful. Yes, it's challenging. It can be the highest possible high. It can be amazing. But getting that harmony is what it's all about, and that's challenging.
Yeah, I really like that you said that about a lot of business is soulless, because I can certainly speak to that from my experience of when I was going through what I was going through, but more so, more in recent years. And it's interesting that you say about the pandemic and being able to work from home, because when I was pregnant, I had a complicated pregnancy, and I was actually signed off by the doctor, not signed off work, but she said, the commute is putting stress on your body and affecting the baby's growth. So do you think can you do your job from home? And I was like, well, I can, but my employer won't, is highly unlikely to let me. And she said, well, I'll write you a letter, see if that makes a difference. And I took this letter in and I was so anxious, so I've already had, all this stressful information that she's given me. It's my first pregnancy, no idea what's going on. It's not going well. And then I've got to go and ask, can I work from home? Knowing full well that they are going to hate that. And it's going to be like a black mark against my name with work. and it's just going to be problem after problem I've become a problem for them. That's how I felt. Me getting pregnant was a problem for my employer. And then when I did bring the letter, they took a good few days to respond to me. And it was like, well, what are you going to be able to do? How will we know that you're doing the work? And I was like, come on, like, I'm a head of department here. Like I'm having a baby. I need my job. Like, there's nothing, untoward here. Otherwise I would just leave, but I need it. That's why I'm asking for your help. And they were so reluctant to help. And in these past 2 years of pandemic, so much has changed. And well, what I see has changed, or I'm seeing lots of bills going through Parliament, especially for flexible working for women and things like that. I'm seeing a lot of women running their own businesses, and obviously businesses are being more open to working from home culture. But this change is so refreshing, and so it's just so beautiful to see. But then I'm also not in the world of work, so I don't know how much of an effect this is actually having in the workplace, or if it's still very businesses at the top who are doing it, but not so much everyone else adapting. What do you think?
I think it's at a vertical level. I think different verticals, different industries are better at it than others. So, in the digital media type space, it's been a bit more prevalent, a bit more common for a long period of time. In the travel space, they're adjusting to it. And it, when you've got a group of customers all wanting refunds, it's hard to put the reservation center to be based from home, but they adapted, they pivoted, and they made it happen. But banking, things like that, it's been a lot harder and a lot slower to adjust. And I think case by case, industry by industry, it's getting better, but it's not necessarily where it needs to be everywhere. But certainly in the space that you and I have worked in, I know from contacts, networks, friends, that it is more accepted. And actually, there's real nervousness now about keeping staff, keeping good people, because of not having flexible working, or that skill set, that talent might go to another industry where the challenges are not as hard as they have been in the travel and hospitality sector, for instance.
I think that's a really good point, actually. It's like flexible working has now become a perk that employers can use to attract good talent, because I sure as hell know this. When I'm looking at I'm not looking at job ads for myself, but I'm looking to see what's happening in the market. And you can tell by a job ad whether a company has changed the way they sort of, sell themselves, if you like.
Absolutely.
And they're really going for it with the flexible working, because before you would get your birthday off, that was your, pathetic.
Yeah.
It's like, why would I want the day off for my birthday? Like, no one's around.
It's a Tuesday.
Just sit there on my own, celebrating my birthday. Oh, I've got the whole day off. But flexible working has become this perk now. And I've noticed that, and even like when I talk to my husband about potentially him changing his sort of career trajectory, he's like, I want to work from home. I want to work closer to home. He doesn't want to work from home, which is fine by me as well, but because I work from home. But he wants to work closer to home, like week after week. He's feeling it even more, because obviously that the light was shone, wasn't it, when we were at home in lockdown. And I like, in a sense, it's quite worrying, obviously, that employers can basically use this flexible working as a carrot, but it's probably one of the best carrots that you could have had, in your toolbox of, right, well, how am I going to get the best employees, right?
Well, I think so. And I think I think history will judge it, but I think history may look at it and say, look, actually, if we look at engagement levels across businesses 2, 5, 10 years post-pandemic versus pre-pandemic, actually people are happier because they've got more flexibility. They can achieve balance. They can do the school run. They can live their life around the requirements of a busy working environment. Whereas when it was so rigid pre-pandemic, I know many people that just found it impossible, really hard, impossible really. And so I think, you can drop the kids off at school and still have a career. And I think employers are recognizing that, and that can only be to the benefit of the bottom line and the benefit of culture and staff engagement.
Yeah, exactly. I've always wondered why there was a lack of trust between employer and employee, or when it happened. Because when I think about my parents' generation, so my dad is 72 now, so his generation was very much about, you have this job and you're in it for 20, 30 years, that is your job. You progress within that job. They look after you. I remember when my dad wanted to buy a house for the first time, it was all like, he said, right, I'm buying a house. And they said, well, take all the overtime you need. We'll write you whatever letter you need for the banks. I mean, these are 80 grand mortgages at the time for a 3-bed semi in London. Right. And he did. And they supported you to be family men and women, to also leave, clock out, leave different shifts. Everything was very much more geared towards work and home life. And then, I don't want to say the digital era necessarily, but it changed, and it changed very quickly at a point. I couldn't pinpoint exactly when, but it just went crazy, and we've had to give so much of ourselves, and there's been such a lack of trust in the workplace. I've always felt uncomfortable to ring in sick, because it's like they're going to think I'm not telling the truth. I'm just bunking off today. But it's like, no, I'm genuinely unwell. Even with throughout my pregnancy, I felt guilty for having the complications of my pregnancy. And I thought that was going to be a definite write-off for the job. Turned out I was made redundant in maternity leave, but that's for another day. But it's where do you think this lack of trust from employer to employee has come from? Because I think that's a big issue as well.
Yeah, and I think it's a legacy thing. I think it's generational. I think it's endemic in some cultures within certain businesses and certain industries. But it has to be about productivity and output. It has to be about demonstrating that I'm doing the job in the time that you need me to do the job. And if I'm missing those deadlines or the work isn't of a good standard, then let's have those conversations. But I'm like you, I can't pinpoint it exactly. I think the world, the digital era made the world move fast, and everything was available quickly, and people wanted answers there and then, and therefore deadlines got shrunk, and bottom lines got squeezed and things like that. But I think if the employee is recognizing the positive impact that flexible working has to if the employer is recognizing, the positive impact to the employee and the employee's family, because you get the employee and their family because they're happy, they're engaged because of how flexible the employer is. That, again, I go back, that can only be a really positive thing for all concerned. And if it's too restrictive, if it's too strangulatory, it's just not gonna work for everyone involved.
I think today, definitely, it won't work if anyone is too strangulatory. The people just walk. They'll just walk. That's definitely, culture has absolutely moved now, which is a positive as well. It's not the worst thing. So when you were I'm going to ask you, when you were in the thick of it, okay? So whichever job that was in, like the most high pressure job that you were in, what were the things that were most stressful about the work that you were doing? Was it things like the bottom line, the bottom line, the constant figures, Richard, the figures?
So I think there's two, in hindsight, not at the time, my answer would have been different at the time, but I think on reflection, it's two things. One is that I was working internationally and my head office was based in the States. And so they were 5 hours behind. So it wasn't asked of you, but if you're doing the right job, you're online doing that stuff. So I'd come home, see the kids, put the kids to bed, see my wife, have dinner, and I'll be on emails. And I chose to do that. But it was my drug. And so therefore, I wanted to do it. But I think in hindsight, that was adding a lot of stress to both me professionally, but also me personally in terms of my ability to disconnect. And then the second thing is I was on a plane every week. I was traveling every week. And you get quite addicted to, being that George Clooney character, in that film, swiping through and going through and being faster and racking up the points and stuff. It doesn't mean anything. And it's great fun. It's brilliant fun. But actually it was adding to stress. And as I'll talk about in terms of my toolkit to well-being, I think I wasn't eating well, wasn't looking after myself. And so that may not have felt stressful at the time, but it had an impact on me. And therefore, I think travel and juggling when I was online and when I wasn't were the two biggest things, really. I enjoy trading the business and hitting my numbers. That's kind of part of doing the job that I love. But balancing the inbox, the demands, I loved the team stuff, but it just became, it wasn't 9 to 5, and no job is, but I got the balance wrong.
So do you think you were putting a lot of pressure on yourself?
So I think it's a really good question. Yes, I was, but that's only because I'm a very competitive human being. And I think lots of leaders of businesses, I don't want to label titles, but I think lots of leaders of businesses are quite competitive and they want to achieve. Yeah. And when you hit year one, you hit your best numbers ever, you're like, oh, I've got to beat that now. I want to beat that in year two. And then you do it for 5 years on the trot, and it's like, okay, I can't lose this now. Or winning an award or whatever it may be. So I think, there's an inherent amount of pressure because the trappings of it are so attractive that, as I say, it becomes highly addictive. So you've got a understanding that there is life outside of it, and getting that harmony, which is the hardest thing of all to do, is critical, really.
So when you say now on reflection, you realize that, you weren't eating well, you weren't looking after yourself well. At the time, did you know that you weren't eating well? Did you know you were eating pot noodles and just
plain food, lots of plain food,
right? Yeah.
No, I yes and no. I had a conscious awareness of it, but I think at a more fundamental, deep down level, I started to realize, certainly in my last full-time role, about 6 or 7 months before I opted to take redundancy, I recognized that I was a bit strung out, and that I was, I had a bit of anxiety, my tummy wasn't happy, and I'll talk about that in a second, that I was not sleeping great, I was a bit more grumpy at home. Yeah. So I wasn't exercising as much. And that was years of busy life, busy schedule, not putting back in enough onto me. And that's what you do, isn't it? You just it becomes a snowball down a mountain. And so, I reckon in its most profound way, I guess, I recognised that 6 or 7 months before I took redundancy. And so actually taking redundancy ended up being a great thing. But at the time, it's never a great thing, is it?
No, God, no, you're panicking, of course. And especially as a high achiever, because you're like, now what do I do?
What's your purpose?
I was just about to say, what's your purpose? Because as a high achiever, you attribute your successes, your achievements to your existence. That's who you are. And it's like, no, baby, that's what you do. It's not who you are. Who you are is all the other stuff that you forgot about. So redundancy is, I mean, I made the most of my redundancy and went to the Maldives. So
well done. Yes. Well done. Yeah, very good. That's the perfect place to go.
It was the perfect place to go. My son's first ever holiday at the age of 1 was to the Maldives, and he'll always have that. And
that's good taste. Yeah. That's good taste.
Yeah. Very much about turning a negative into a positive. I mean, that was an extreme, but I could do it, so I did it. I want to just, before we get into your toolkit, because I know there's going to be a lot of gems there, I want to ask you about, as a man in a very masculine industry, especially at the time of, some of the places that you've worked, did you ever feel like there was that pressure to perform? You had that pressure to perform within yourself because you want to do a good job, etc. But did you feel like you also couldn't drop the ball because there were expectations, I guess, for you as a man, that you had to always be, I'm, literally on top of it. I can deal with it. I'm on it,
Yeah, I think there's an element of that, certainly. And I think, again, it's probably more subconscious than conscious, unspoken rather than spoken.
Yeah.
And I think if I think about how business has changed in the last 2 or 3 years, particularly around diversity and things like that, it is now far more common to have allies to people that may be LGBTQ or whatever it may be. But that is far less common for people experiencing high levels of stress or whatever it may be. We've got a employee assistance program. It may be that there's a private health scheme in place, but you don't often get sat down by someone senior going, and how are you? Unless you're managing a really severe change process or whatever. But as a run-of-the-mill chat, that doesn't happen very much. And I think that's kind of gender agnostic. Actually, I think that's male or female. I don't think it happened as much. I think businesses have got better at recognizing that and are making great strides in that. And some of the partnerships with apps and third-party providers show that. But I think, as I say, I never felt it hugely consciously, but it was there to a certain extent. And I think it was there more when I reported into a male rather than into a female as well. I think the female energy that I tended to report into tended to have quite good maternal instincts and would ask some good questions. And the guys tended to not, they tended to have them in a very corporate, have I asked that question? I'll tick that box. And tried to be paternal, but weren't quite as good at it.
I think definitely, I agree. I think the landscape is changing with that as well. But I remember, and I'm sure a lot of women still feel this today, you feel as a woman that you have to prove yourself even more, especially if you're at that childbearing age, you might have just got married, that your employer is just thinking, oh, she's going to have maternity leave soon, and then that's going to bother the company and this, that, and the other. And you do, as a woman, you think about these things. And it's like, if you enjoy your job and you want to stay in your job and you need your job, then you're going to do more than it takes to try to keep it, and all the rest of it. So you feel like you're constantly trying to prove yourself to yourself, and then you're proving yourself to your company, and then you've got to sort of keep up appearances regardless of what's going on, so that you don't let the side down in any way when you're just doing a normal human thing to have a kid. It's amazing how things have changed. Thank you for that. So let's head into your wellbeing toolkit. What kept you sane throughout all of this?
Well, I think if I think back to my last role, actually, I didn't know what my toolkit was. And that was part of the problem, if that makes sense. And that was kind of why I got a bit strung out. And so I think now I'm in a far better position to know what my toolkit is. In fact, I'm very clear on what it is. Whereas before I wasn't quite as clear. I knew that exercise was quite important, and I knew that disconnecting was quite important, but I couldn't have told you what I'm about to tell you. So a good friend of mine really helped me to kind of understand this. And I think that where I'm at in my life now is that, irrespective of work, and I'm freelancing currently, but there are, in my view, 5 pillars to wellness and well-being. And so please cut me off, but if I get too if I get too kind of if I drone on too much about these things. But so effectively, and I'll end with the most important one, if I may. So the first one is nutrition. And that's pretty obvious, but that's about eating the right thing and making just about more mindful eating. And I was that buffet hoover at work. I was the guy. Oh, look, the cookies are out, quick! I was up there, and I'll be first in the front of the queue. And what I've learned, actually, this has been something that's quite recent for me, but I've learned that just changing habits, proteins for breakfast, not carbs. Milk changes, things like that, can make an absolutely enormous difference. And it's not about being on some uber crash diet, but it's just about mindfully eating a bit more than you can do it quite easily. Protein shakes or vegetable shakes and things for breakfast are a much better alternative than my favorite, which used to be toast and marmalade. But, and I miss that hugely, but I haven't had it for 3 or 4 months, and I feel much better for it. So so nutrition is really important.
It's interesting with breakfast. I mean, I like, one of my key pillars is the morning routine. It really sets you up, and if you can create one that is just 20 minutes, half an hour, an hour, it's just such a game changer in terms of changing your lifestyle. It just does that. And within that, nutrition is one of those things. And we naturally have, and it's food industry, we can blame America, cereals and things like that, but all these sweet related foods in the morning. And as an Indian, we don't eat sweet in the morning, you eat savory. So it's very normal to have a savory breakfast for us, whereas it wasn't, obviously living in the UK. And so whenever I'd go to my mum's house and she would make an Indian breakfast, it was always the best breakfast, of the week, right? Compared to eating Cocoa Pops or whatever as a kid. Absolutely brilliant. So it's very interesting that you've said that about nutrition and mindful nutrition. I think that's quite important. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's not just shoveling it in because it tastes great. It's actually thinking about, right, what is this going to do for me? So for instance, I have a tricky tummy, and I'll explain that on the next bit. And actually, I used to love porridge for breakfast, and porridge is actually pretty good, but I actually eat gluten-free porridge now because it is actually far gentler, and it lasts for me a tiny bit longer. And instead of having honey on it or a maple syrup or something sweet on it, I have peanut butter in it.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And it just, again, it's a protein. It gives you slightly more energy. It lasts a bit longer. And it's just, I am by no means a diet expert at all, but those simple changes of proteins in the morning rather than carbs, almonds as a snack. I've eaten my body weight in almonds in the last 3 months, rather than something else, a carb-based alternative. Those things are much, much better for you.
Okay. Brilliant. All right. What's number 2?
Well, number 2 has been my most recent discovery, and it's been over the course of the last 12 months. But it's kind of everywhere. It's the buzzword in a lot of places at the moment, which is gut health and the importance of gut health and the link to emotional well-being of gut health. And when I was a bit strung out in my last role, I started to get tummy pains, and I had a year's worth of kind of discovery about what was causing it and why was I getting it. And what I've learned is that actually I've worked with a nutritionist, and they've helped me understand what was going on. But I'm part of a generation. I was born in the 70s where it was just like, just eat some stuff, and we don't take supplements and things like that. But actually, I've totally flipped that down. So gut health for me, and what I'm finding works for me, is a combination of prebiotics and probiotics, and those probiotics are water-based, not dairy-based, because they're better absorbed, and something called butyrate, which really is the foundation for wellness in your tummy. And I'm not medically trained, so please, research if you're going to take any of that stuff. Don't blame me. But if you can get your gut in harmony, that really helps your whole well-being and your whole brain. And I never knew that. I've learned that in the last year, along with improved focus on nutrition, and that's made an enormous difference to me. Because then you're not having any pain, you're not having any discomfort, and actually, because they call the stomach the second brain. If your tummy is calm and in harmony, then it's much more likely that your brain will be as well.
Yep, 100% believe that. Ayurveda, which is ancient Indian science of life, it speaks on that. So we've been Indians, people who practice Ayurveda, have been aware of the link between the gut, the digestive system essentially, and our emotions. And that's why yoga works the way it works. Well, of course, the whole of the philosophy. That's why Ayurveda treats, it works in the prevention of disease, basically. So it always goes to, well, what else is going on? Yes, you've said that your stomach's hurting, but what else is going on in your life? Because it's those things that are causing the problems. It's not just what you're putting into your mouth, because also what you're putting in is a direct result. So if I'm having a bad day, I'm a cake person, I want cake, right? That's me. Emotional, it's cake, it's that sort of food. And then I say, oh, I'm really bloated. Well, because you've been eating cake. Well, yes, but then why are you eating the cake? Because I hate my life. Well, there you go. So let's fix your life, and then you'll stop eating cake, and you're I'm being very simplistic here, but it's the sort of the way Ayurveda works. So I love that, we're sort of sitting here, those of us who know Ayurveda, sitting here in the sidelines watching like the gut health doctors and all these sort of like trend, that I say that in inverted commas because it's not a trend, but that's how the media sort of like depicts them, and wellness.
Well, it's like a new finding, isn't it? It's like, exactly. Gut health is a new finding, and it's been around for thousands of years, but you need to understand what it means for you.
Correct. Yes.
And I think that's the challenging thing, because I actually, probably oversharing, I found out that I had, parasites and God knows what in there. So I had to go through a process of clearing that out, but at the same time regaining harmony. And the way that I've done that is through a combination of, and I forgot to mention something, also using something called liquid fiber, which I would recommend to everyone as a way to just top up and make sure you're getting enough of the good stuff, because that dissolves into a cup of tea and it's tasteless.
Liquid, that's a really good point, liquid fiber, because it's so difficult to get fiber in the quantities that we need it in our everyday food. It really is tricky.
You can get the scratchy stuff, which is no good for you, like the all brands and all that kind of stuff, but soluble fiber that can really make a difference. That's been a big discovery for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's brilliant. I think it's what you're saying. It's that awareness and like bringing it back down to yourself, because it's all well and good. You read all these articles and studies or whatever, but how does that actually apply to yourself? And I'm glad that you've sort of like gone down that route and found.
Well, that's been the latest one, I have to say. The others kind of been a work in progress for a while, but that one has been very current. Actually, I've got my last session with my nutritionist today. So that's gut health, and then all these are interlinked, obviously. And then the third one is no surprise on this one is emotional health. So. And that includes mental health, and I sort of have it under a catch-all as emotional health, and that really is very important to have a toolkit there, in my view. It doesn't matter if you're a CEO, managing director, or if you're first job out of university, having a toolkit of what to do, how to do, knowing it's okay to not be okay, who to talk to. And that actually there are many holistic treatments out there that can really make a difference to how you feel. For me, that's about acupuncture. I've been seeing an acupuncturist now for, 3 or 4 years, and I see him every 6 weeks for a tune up and a tune in, and it makes me feel really, really good. But the other part of it, which is very hard to do when you've got a big job, and people always say it, and so how do you do that, is disconnecting to reconnect. And we have a very simple rule in the Twynam household, which is there's no tech upstairs. So there's no TVs, there's no computers, there's no tablets, there's no telephones, nothing. So that when you go up there, you know that you're able to connect and, do what you need to do.
Yeah.
Because that emotional wellbeing part is absolutely critical. And it's great that there's such an increased awareness and increased focus now in popular culture and in the public domain of mental health. And it's absolutely critical. But I think it's wrong to label it all as mental health. It's emotional health. And that's about who you can talk to that won't judge and will support. And that, and that's an opportunity for companies to improve and get better on. But also there's an onus on the person to understand who they need to speak to and what support they need to.
Absolutely. I think emotional health is so much of a healthier way of approaching it, because that's exactly what it is. It is emotional health. I come back to Ayurveda and yoga philosophy because I use it in my practice a lot as sort of like the basis of my theory and how I work with clients. So I work on that holistic way. But with emotional health, it's all the emotions, it's how you're reacting, why you're reacting. And I find that the words mental health straight away make people feel there's a cringe associated to mental health, because you think mental health asylum, mental health institution, if we think about the sort of the 80s, and that's kind
of
the
negative connotations
correct
with it. Yeah.
So if I see a counselor, if I see a shrink, just that term, it's like that it's not what it is. Well, what are they going to do? Well, you're going to talk, I can talk to my friend. No, they're trained to talk to you to get you to the root of your problem, so that you can then see why these things happen, bring it to your awareness, and then you can change the way you live. Always up to you if you're going to change it. There's no magic wand or formula. You have to still do it. And that's why you do it. But people still, when it comes to the words mental health, like even today, whenever I see it, I do find it sometimes a little bit exhausting, like mental health first aider. I find it's just a bit aggressive. What about just an emotional health coach and emotional health support? They're softer words, they're more accessible, they aren't stigmatized. Mental health is stigmatized, so therefore we carry an unconscious negative association to those words. So whenever we see it or hear it, it's just like, no, I don't know. And people won't get the help. So I think mental health should be rebranded emotional health.
Well, that's why I said it. I totally agree. And I think you've got to be very brave in any job that you do to flag that you do need to speak to someone and that you do need some help, and businesses need to listen, respond and take note, because as we started the conversation, the well-being of their teams is absolutely critical to the success of the business. And emotional health is, everyone has emotions. Everyone can be, totally dumbstruck by something that happens on a normal Tuesday afternoon kind of thing, so you've got to have a toolkit to be able to deal with that stuff.
Yep, 100%. Okay, number 4.
Well, it's linked to that, it's physical health, movement, and so look, we're not all Joe Wicks, and I kind of get that, but keeping active, walking, being out in nature, you talked about yoga, any form of exercise is great. Sex, that's important. Anything that moves your body, gets the heart rate up, has got to be absolutely fundamentally important to your well-being. And actually, even if it's raining, there's no such thing. My wife is Swiss, so this is where I get this from. There's no such thing as bad weather, just the wrong clothes.
Yes.
So you just got to get out there and in the rain, in the cold, in the fog, when it's grey on a November day, and it will make you feel better for doing it. You'll never regret it. So physical movement is number 4, and it's very important.
Okay. What do you do for your physical? What's your go-to?
So I've got a few, actually. So I don't do as much yoga as my wife would like me to do. That is absolutely true, which is terrible. But I do. I can do it. So for me, we have a friend that's a personal trainer. So we see her a couple of times a week. I've got a bike which I go out on 2 or 3 times a week, and the next one's actually linked to a bit of emotional health, which was I was really missing this summer, being part of a team. And leading teams. I've always been the leader of teams, and I loved that camaraderie, and I'd really missed it. So this year, for the first time in 30 years, I joined the cricket club that I live next door to. Well done. And as a chap in his late 40s. I started playing cricket for the fourths.
Amazing.
And we only won one game all season. I didn't even play in that game, but I absolutely loved it, and it reconnected me to being part of a team. My family have all got involved, so physical exercise can have really emotional health benefits as well. But as a combination of all of those first four, I've lost a stone in weight this year. I feel the fittest I've felt probably in my adult life. And so, that it's all is, if one bit of it doesn't work, you're out of harmony and you're out of balance, and it won't work. So it's really hard, particularly when you've got a big job, and I didn't achieve it, to keep these things in harmony. But in hindsight, I've learned that, these things, when they're all working together, are a pretty magical combination.
Yeah, definitely. So what's your final pillar?
Well, the last one's the most important one of all, which is sleep. And if you can't sleep properly, you can't rest properly because of the high levels of stress or whatever else, then it's hard. And I've had a pretty mixed relationship with sleep over the years, working hard, jet lag, lots of travel, using kind of any immediate crutch that I could in order to get sleep, be it a sleeping tablet, we've all used the odd glass of wine, whatever it may be. And I'm pleased to say I'm in a great relationship now with my sleep, although I'm bound not to sleep tonight, having said that. But I've been asked, particularly in the corporate world, I was asked quite a lot by team members and stuff, what would I recommend? Who would I read? And for me, there's only one option, which is a book called The Sleep Book by a guy called Dr. Guy Meadows. And he has an app called the Sleep School app. And those two things are the best things I've read and are the easiest to understand when it comes to sleep. It's quite cold turkey, that approach. And there is a sort of phased version of cold turkey in those approaches if you download it or buy the book. But it takes away some quite old school nonsense around sleep rituals and all these kind of things that you just don't need. It comes back to a very simple approach about there's a stage before you fall asleep. And if you get into that stage before you fall asleep, then you'll find rest. And so, sleep is a very hard one to crack because we all have lifestyles that impact it. But for me, of the five, that's the one that if you get that right, you can, anyone who has a good night's sleep, they feel better the next day, don't they?
Yeah, 100%. No argument from me here. Sleep is, totally top of the list.
So there you go. That's my toolkit. That's my knowledge.
Brilliant. That's a great toolkit. That's really, really good. It's nice to hear how you've applied it and, throughout your journey. And there's a lot there as well, at the same time, there is a lot there. Like you say, when you start like the gut health journey, for instance, it can be quite a minefield. You've done it the right way with the nutritionist.
I worked with the wrong nutritionist first time. And that led to problems for about 4 months. No. And actually, it's only been since August that I found the right one. And since August, so where are we now? November, so that's 3 months. It's really, really worked.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. And I'm a massive advocate of it. Yeah.
I know. I wish the listeners could see your face. Like when throughout the whole show, as you've been talking about gut health, you just light up. Like,
I do. I've learned all about it. I'm very excited. This butyrate is an amazing thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's been revolutionary for you, and it's to see that reaction. It's very heartwarming. It's brilliant. Very, very good. So, because there are various different places and of where you could start with your well-being and your health and being less stressed and managing and trying to figure out what the thing is that you need to do for yourself as an individual. Where do you think people should start? Because there is a lot of talk, and I've just actually contributed to an article in Health and Wellbeing magazine about whether we're actually feeling very overwhelmed by the wellness industry. Like we're supposed to be well, we're supposed to take care of ourselves, self-care Sundays, this, that, and the other. Where do we start? And it's something that I pride myself on. And the first episode of my show talks about it, that, and this was back in 2019 that I recorded that show, that says, calm down. Just start with a cup of tea in the morning or coffee and just be with yourself, because I can guarantee 90% of you aren't doing that. You're getting up, you're getting dressed and you're out, you're giving yourself away to the world before you've even considered who you are today, how you're feeling, and, just been with yourself before you give to everyone else. That's my tip.
I think that's brilliant advice. And I'm not going to improve on that. I can add to it. And the way I would add to it is to say, one of the things, and you've heard me talk about this before, I've really learned this philosophy of kind of unconditional self-appreciation.
Wow.
And so knowing that you're good enough, knowing that you're okay, you're a good person, and whatever life throws at you, that doesn't change, And so we all get thrown out by something, because that's what life is. But understanding that that's okay, and as you say, grab a cuppa, and just everything passes in time. Everything passes in time. A migraine goes away, the rain goes away, and the sun comes up. So just acknowledging that and understanding that, and having that level of self-appreciation is really, really important. That's a good place to start, and then go through it in a way that suits you and your life and what's going on in your universe. But little steps make big differences to me.
They do. I'd agree with that. Okay, brilliant. So before we wrap up, just the last point, or actually the last point to wrap up. If somebody listening is, because I work with people who are high achievers, high performers, ambitious, they're going to want to work hard. They're going to want to do what they need to do.
Great fun.
To climb that ladder, get to the top of wherever they're going, and yep, I support that. I'm that person as well. I'm here to live, and I want to try everything that I want to try, and everything else. What tip would you give someone who is on their climb? Like, what is the total non-negotiable tip that if they do this, they'll really put themselves in a good place?
That's a big question and a hard one to answer. So I think trying to understand, be it thinking about it or writing it down, what balance looks like for you.
Amazing.
Is a good way to think about it. So if you could fast forward 3 years from where you are today, looking at what that role looks like, but what does that picture of you as a person look like? Is that a family? Is that a bigger house? Is it loads of cash? Is it health? Whatever it is to you, but having some kind of visioning around what that looks like is a balanced way to do it. And you won't achieve it all. You might smash it all, but at least you'll have an idea of what it looks like. And if you don't write it down, you haven't got a Scooby. Yeah.
No, that's brilliant. And it gives you the compass of where you start. Like, if you want to be there in 3 years, what you need to do today in order to get there. So, yeah.
Of course. I hope that helps.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I really enjoyed that. Well, you and I could talk for ages. So thank you so much, Richard. I think this has been a wonderful show. Really appreciate all your lovely content. I mean, those 5 pillars of wellness are brilliant. And I'm so pleased to hear the gut health stuff's really worked for you. It's amazing.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Self-Care 101 podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate and review over on Apple Podcasts so that other people like you can find the show. For more information about the work I do, head over to my website, PujaMcClymont.com, and for daily inspiration, please connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram at Puja McClymont. Sending love and talk to you soon.